Live. Hello and welcome to A Fuller Understanding on the Auto Limits channel. That is what we're called, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
It's been a couple of weeks.
Yes.
I am your host, Craig, and with me as ever is my co-host, Robert Beams. Hello, Rob.
Hello, Craig. How's it going today?
It's going well, yeah. It's a beautiful day, actually, for a November morning, to the point where you think this planet really is on fire. Yeah. It's nice, but it's very concerning. Yeah. No, we are here today to talk about Sam Fuller's film House of Bamboo, as we move chronologically through his filmography. This is
Yeah.
the next one after the last one. So
Is this his final Fox film on the Zanuck deal, or is
this
the next
is
one a Fox as well?
yeah. So this is part 4 of the Fox deal. He had intended to make a film in London in the sort of 6 months off, because he had the 6 months on, 6 months off contract, and that, funnily enough, was a film about a bunch of GIs doing some sort of heist. Which kind of never really happened. He was going to make it with two famous producers, two brothers whose names escape me.
The Bolting brothers, or
No, John
I
and
think
Jimmy
of
Wolfe.
British. Oh, okay.
So they did Room at the Top of Human Bondage,
Okay.
Oliver,
Okay, yeah.
and Day of the Jackal. But for whatever reasons, he thought they were very, very talented and lovely fellas, but for whatever reason, this didn't pan out for them. And then Zanuck tried to get him to do some other books. That one called Soldier of Fortune, and The Left-Handed God, neither of which he particularly gelled with, and both of which ended up being directed. I forgot the word directed. Edward Dimtrick. With Clark Gable. So, and then it was basically suggested that he go and make a film in Japan, and he loved this idea. He just thought, yes, I'll go and make a film in Japan, and they kind of pulled together elements of all those unrealized projects and made this script, along with Harry Kleiner, and basically he talks about his mother having he doesn't specify, but he says Asian friends. When he was younger, he used to come over quite a lot, and he was always listened to their stories, and he was just fascinated with Japan and China and that part of that end of the world, and was just sort of jumped at the chance to go and work in Japan. So this came about mainly because Zanuck suggested they film in Japan, which was, there was only about 2 or 3 American films that had been made in Japan at this point, and Sam Fuller wanted to go. This was like an Adam Sandler project, where he just wants to go on. Yeah.
So you normally have from his autobiography some sort of insight into how he feels about this one. Is this one of his films that he's kind of proud of, or does he sort of just see it as a nice time in Japan, this one?
No, he says quite a lot about this. I mean, the stuff that he mainly goes into in terms of sort of hating stereotypes and whatnot, we can talk about that a little bit later. But that's what he talks about there, really. And there's some really sort of Fullerian themes and tropes that come through in this, I think, for definite.
It's interesting because in the opening credits, it says additional dialogue by Samuel Fuller. So he's not credited as writing the story, but he obviously is credited for bringing in some of his dialogue. I didn't necessarily notice too many Fullerisms in the dialogue on this one, but maybe you've got some written down.
No, I didn't either.
Quite restrained.
I was looking out for them, but I couldn't. No, I thought it was, didn't think there was particularly a lot of his kind of zingers, which kind of have a 50-50 hit ratio, I think. So it's about it's should I give the setup?
Yeah, give us the setup.
So it's about the background is there is this so it starts with a cold open of a train robbery of a train in Japan, and all these military supplies being just kind of taken out, great train robbery style. And then we meet Eddie Spagna, who is this kind of low, kind of, well, not low time, what was it? Small time crook and hustler who finds his way to Tokyo and starts shaking down pachinko parlors and is quickly steps on the toes of the local mob. They kind of put him in his place, but the mob boss takes a shine to him, and sort of takes him under the wing, and he starts pulling jobs with them. At the same time, he starts an affair with his friend's widow. He's come over because his friend had offered him this job, but his friend had died recently, so he ends up
Yeah, his friend was one of the people who does the train robbery at the start, and so
and
he's
gets
kind
killed.
of comes over and he's kind of trying to find out who killed his friend as well, isn't he?
Yeah. They have this romance, and then quickly it's kind of well, not quickly, but then it's kind of revealed that he's actually an undercover military police officer, and it's this kind of Reservoir Dogs thing that goes on at the end, really. So that's it. Yeah, it's very much basically like a noir story, but in Technicolor.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what we got going on here.
My feeling on it is that the location shooting and the really nice kind of color widescreen photography is very much the star of this film, and that it is bookended by a really cool like train robbery sequence, which surprises you because the way it unfolds, everything's really well done. And then it has at the end like a gunfight in a fun fair, which is really cool. And then in between is loads of like boring looking middle-aged men in fedoras mumbling at each other, and I didn't care about any of them or what they were doing at any point.
Right. Okay. I mean, you cards laid on the table there, Rob.
What was your? I think you liked it quite a bit more than me. What was your sort of overall?
I did. I like the kind of noirish men in fedoras chatting with each other, and the map work and the heist work and all that kind of stuff, and uh, the kind of the identifying the mole stuff and all those kind of. I mean, it's very tropey. It is very very kind of these are the story beats, and there are a few little things in there that are very fuller, like
Yeah.
like the protagonist cold clocking the female lead and then
Yeah.
falling in love with her instantly.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. There's always this thing in a fuller film where the protagonist has to really smack a woman one, not a slap, not that that's okay either, but not like your kind of traditional movie open-handed slap, but like a proper punch in the face. And then soon after that, like the woman starts the process of like falling in love with the man, and that's something that's happened so many times up to this point, even quite early into his filmography, that it's slightly disturbing. But then at the same time, as you pointed out about him not liking stereotypes, he's also had this consistent thing right from the beginning of watching them where he doesn't like to present like Asian Americans in particular, but he's also had it with like African Americans and other groups where he tries to be not so stereotypical of how they're presented and tries to present actual characters who aren't just kind of white guys. And you get, I think, in his big budget Fox films, because we thought this with the one on the submarine that we watched last time. I can't remember the name of already.
Hell and High Water.
Hell and High Water. With some of the big budget Fox films, it feels like maybe that's squeezed a little bit on his lower budget films. The casts are much more diverse and the kind of POC characters are much bigger. But it's still a thread through his work that if he's going to have like an Asian character, they're not going to be like a comedy side piece or like a stereotype. They're going to be just a character who happens to be like an Asian person, which is cool. So it's this weird thing, like you said in the very first episode, where Fuller wasn't really nailing his pillars to a particular kind of political post, and he was very like, don't even know if that's the phrase, to any particular mast, and he's not he's not kind of a particularly sort of like, as we would call now, like woke, but he's also not like, you know, like Ronald Reagan or John Wayne,
No.
but that he does things that would kind of piss off both camps, and also
Yeah.
things that both would kind of quite like.
It's kind of to me, it's kind of like he would be a like a progressive granddad who's got the right attitudes but uses all the wrong words. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that
I know exactly what you mean.
um
I
yeah,
think that is that. I think that's exactly it.
yeah.
So my first note on this film, apart from the great open, is my first note.
It's
But my
stunning,
my
like the
yeah,
cinematography and the kind of the backgrounds and the large vistas, and then there's some great shots of the mountains. It's absolutely stunning the way this looks right at the beginning. It's just
yeah,
beautiful. And it's something that I know we said there was some nice stuff in the in Hell and High Water, but a lot of that seemed to be location shooting, studio shooting. This looks proper.
it
Like
does.
it's up there with anything at the time for me. That opening scene.
It really looks great. Yeah, the location, like I said, location shooting and stuff on this is amazing. His use of Cinemascope is great. The first sign that maybe it's slightly creaky for me is
Mm,
that you get this really rubbish narrator voice that sounds like it's from a newsreel that comes
yeah.
in and tells you this film was filmed on location in Yokohama, Tokyo, and whatever. And you
Mm,
kind of think, okay, that's like not part of the film. That's sort of just telling the audience as kind of credits or something. But then that narrator then starts narrating story stuff. But he's the guy that told us about the film being shot in Japan. So it's like it's this weird thing where it's like he's part of the film, but he's also part of kind of breaking the fourth wall and talking to you about the film in a way that's really confusing. And also,
then
like
he
I've
does just go away. He does
well,
just go
that's
away.
what I was going to say is that this happened with one of the earlier Fuller films. Well, I can't remember which. Maybe it's Baron of Arizona or one of them, where there's a narration that's really jarring for like a third of the film, and then it just completely goes away. I think in Baron of Arizona, maybe there was a weird framing device, right, where it would like
Yeah,
cut to these people talking about this guy, and then it
it's
just
like a
suddenly gets
trial,
completely
wasn't it?
dropped.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the same with this. There's this narration for like the first few scenes, bridging some of these scenes, and then it just goes almost like the studio were not confident that the audience would understand what was going on. It was a classic, like I don't know if you've ever seen the kind of compromised studio version of the theatrical version of Brazil, but one of the
Mm.
things that's different
Or
about
Blade
that
Runner.
is Blade Runner as well. Yeah, both of them have this situation going on. Brazil's one's kind of even worse in a way, but both of them have that like narration that gets added because the studio's kind of worried about it, and it does feel a little bit like that to me here.
Well, there is bit. I mean, because it finishes with him saying, with like the narrator going, and then Eddie went to this place, and it's like there's a establishing shot of him going to this place, and it is a little bit like I think with the cold open and with the kind of going to, they were just kind of. I think they just there was a sense that the producers just didn't trust the audience to be able to keep
Mm,
up with what was quite a slow, um, not obvious, but a slow, very clear opening sequence. But yeah, that is really odd. That voice, but it thankfully it goes away pretty quickly. And then
yeah.
again, it does go into another really cool sequence where he goes looking for Mariko, the wife of his dead friend, and she used to be a dancer, so he goes up to this rooftop where they're rehearsing this dance, and there's this wonderful kind of backing shot as everybody's sort of they're rehearsing, and it looks incredible. It's weird. It's like
Mm.
it is like a musical set piece for a second. Um,
Have you seen the Eternals yet?
no,
It reminded me of how Kumar Nanjiani's character is revealed in the Eternals because he's like
uh,
a Bollywood star, and it's very similar. I'm not saying it's a direct reference, but there's a very similar sort of shot, really, where it sort of pans out. Also, it's like I was just saying before we recorded, having watched Kiss Me Deadly today, and how that has this weird kind of reflection in Raiders. This has a weird reflection in Temple of Doom, right? Like, doesn't the beginning of Temple of Doom start it's kind of close on her side,
yeah,
and it kind of zooms back, pulls out? And it's
yeah, well,
interesting because we talked about Spielberg liking Fuller, having him in 1941, liking Hell and High Water, having it in his boot, but also House of Bamboo features in Minority Report projected on a wall.
yes.
So Spielberg has a lot of sort of ties to Fuller, it seems.
It seems like there seems to be a nod in quite a lot of his films, basically.
Mm.
Yeah, I hadn't put that together, but I guess seeing as you were, it was fresh in your mind from yeah. Um, Again, and it goes, you follow him for a little while, and it's got this other thing that's very kind of Fuller is that because I guess it's part of it shooting on location, but the world seems very, very real. Like you go to the docks and there's kids playing, and there's these houseboats and washing out and people working, and it's all very shanty. It's another one of his films that's got this really kind of lived-in feel to it, I think.
Yeah, it's
Um,
interesting as well because, like, obviously, previously on this channel, we covered Kurosawa and we went through his filmography. And around this time, you've got Kurosawa making films set in post-war Japan. Some of his kind of detective films, Stray Dog and Drunken Angel and things like that. And but obviously Kurosawa didn't shoot in color till much later. So it's interesting to see. And actually, in the 50s in Japan, a lot of the films kind of really weren't shot in color. So it's interesting to see this kind of money and this cinemascope and this color brought to post-war Japan as well, and seeing that sort of colored in that way.
well, that's the thing. When I first started, so we are looking at 54. So we're looking at the time of Seven Samurai, aren't we?
Hmm.
Um, so Stray Dog is sort of 6 years before that. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. When I first saw because of what watching Kurosawa and so many of them are in black and white, it always surprised me just how colourful everything is in the streets, and it seems like a really ridiculous thing to say, really, but just sort of the bright primary colours and the sort of it just surprised me. Um, uh,
Yeah.
but I think there was a bit where he's wandering around the streets, to be honest, that did remind me of Stray Dog, where that extended scene where he's
Hmm.
looking for his gun in Stray Dog. There were little shades of that for me. Um, yeah,
Does he have anything in his autobiography about meeting any Japanese filmmakers when he's in Japan, or being at all interested in what was going on in Japanese film at the time?
he talks about spending a lot of time in the cinema and getting really kind of into Japanese cinema and particularly who does he name check somebody in particular. Um, but yeah, he talks about watching Uzo and Kurosawa and name some more, Rob.
uh, Mizuguchi,
Yeah,
Kobayashi.
yeah. He remembers particularly being impressed by the power and beauty of made by Kinagusa,
Okay,
Gate of Hell, which I've actually got on
right.
Blu-ray and
I've
I've
seen
never
that.
watched.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, yeah, that's the one. I think if I'm correct, I think Gate of Hell's the one that won the best foreign language Oscar, like the year that like Rashomon came out or something.
Right. Okay.
I
But
think.
yeah, so he's shooting in the streets. There's a great story actually on here about shooting in the streets. So he's talking about Robert Stack and a scene where he's getting chased through the streets. Yeah, Robert Stack plays our protagonist, I believe, Eddie Spania, which is such a great name. Um, yeah, so this is good. So this kind of gives you an idea of how they were filming. Nothing in Stack's training could have prepared him for the House of Bamboo. In one early scene, I hid our cameras in a tough Tokyo street where gangs, winos, and derelicts lived. I costumed Bob in an old raincoat and told him not to shave so he'd fit right in. He was supposed to rummage through the garbage cans, then run down the streets when we cued him. The camera started rolling. Bob did exactly what I asked him to do. Suddenly, my Japanese production assistant screamed something in Japanese and started pointing at Bob. People came running. Bob didn't understand Japanese, but when he saw the mob rushing towards him, he took off and ran like hell. I told the assistant to yell out, "Thief, thief, get him!" People didn't know it was a movie, so they chased after Bob. It looked damn natural. That was the idea. That kind of
Nice.
gives you an idea of some of his directing techniques as well. Yeah.
Is Bob Robert Ryan in that film?
No, Bob is Robert Stack, Eddie Kenner,
Oh right.
Eddie
Okay, yeah, there's
Spanier.
two Roberts, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that gives you an idea of the kind of. That's why I mean as well. Some of those street scenes they reminded me of Stray Dog because they are pretty much authentic, especially when people are genuinely oh no, there was more to that story. Yeah, I've just remembered. What I hadn't figured on was was a mob assaulting Bob. Fortunately, a Japanese cop was nearby and put an end to it, telling the people that caught Stack that he wasn't really a thief, that we were making the movie. Unfortunately, it all happened too fast for my camera crew, and we never got the scene on film. Bob resented me for that incident for many years, but eventually got over it. So yeah,
Wow.
yeah, it is very much in the streets. But you were kind of bored by the rest of the kind of
I
fedora
I
stuff.
was. I was. I felt like going all the way to Japan and starting with a big train robbery, and then the film basically being American men in suits in rooms talking to each other was a massive wasted opportunity for what this film could have been. Like I just didn't understand it. And like so for me it's like train robbery and the fairground thing at the end. And in between then it feels to me like they don't make enough use of what they could have been doing. Also, I don't expect a film that begins in a train robbery to basically go, oh yeah, that train robbery, so that a guy who robbed the train dies and writes a letter that gets another guy to come, and then he goes to a pachinko parlor to try and rob some money and joins like a pachinko parlor racket. It's like, no, if you're going to start with a massive train robbery and some guys have stolen loads of weapons, they should be doing something a little bit more like high octane with all of that, right?
Yeah,
Like
I
it
mean,
seems really low stakes. They're going, oh, who robbed the train? Oh, the pachinko gang.
yeah, but no, I didn't see it that way. Like, if you see, any kind of mob, story, they've got like an underground, not an underground, an underlying racket that kind of sits and is their steady income. The shakedowns, whether or not
Yeah.
that's the mobs sort of shaking down delis and restaurants and corner shops in like Italian American crime films. That was fine. That's their base, that's their level, and then they plan other heists and things on the side. So there's obviously the train robbery to begin with, and then they're planning this armored car heist as well afterwards,
Yeah.
which like you say was a bit more high octane, high stakes. And I love the bit in that where they're like following the armored car in a red bus, and he's got a record player to play a particular song, if they want to
If they need
call it
to call
off.
it off, yeah.
But
And
I
then all
love
the
the idea.
workers, like pretending to be saw workers, all run off and get in a little car.
But I like the idea. It's a record player on a bumpy Tokyo street.
Yeah.
Sort of.
I have a note. I have a note from before this bit of the film I want to go back to, which is a bit that just confused me completely, and maybe you can help me because it might be me that doesn't understand something here. There's a bit where this the woman in he calls her his kimono. She's like the Japanese woman who's his friend's
Yeah, I
wife,
think that
right? And she,
I think that's
yeah.
like a army slang.
Yeah, that's not what I'm confused about, by the
Yeah,
way. That's just explanation leading
yeah.
into it. So there's a bit where she's offering to cook him an egg, and she asks him what's it cooked, and he says shingle, right? And she's like, "What, a shingle?" And then she's like, "I know sunny side up, and I know whatever, but I don't know what a shingle is." And then he just said, "Do you have bread?" And then she says, "Yeah, I've got bread." And he says, "Well, you toast the bread and you put an egg on it." And then she says, "Poached." And then he goes, "Yes, poached." I can't understand this conversation. It haunts my waking life. Like I don't get it. Like how that seems so like it seems like it's been poorly translated from a foreign film or something. Like it makes the chain of logic on it is so strange to me. Like I not only have I not heard of a poached egg being called a shingle, but maybe that's like old fashioned slang. But
That's right. I'm just looking it up because it didn't
that
rub up against me. I don't think I caught it, but I'm
but that
looking at.
business specifically of describing a poached egg by saying that it's on toast blew my mind because every variation of egg can be on toast as far as I'm concerned. Maybe in the 50s poached eggs were very specifically on toast and
Right.
fried eggs weren't, but
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, to be honest, I've googled two things here. One was shingle eggs, and it
Oh,
comes up
shingle
with
eggs.
basically eating eggs makes shingle pain go through the roof, is what I'm saying. You can't eat eggs when you got shingles because it really hurts for some reason. And then I found another one from Vice.
Okay.
And this is a beef and milk gravy dish traditionally served in US Army camps. And it is a poached egg on toast with loads of other stuff. So it's like an army
Okay.
breakfast, but
That makes sense.
it's actually called shit on a shingle.
Okay, well, it being like an army way of having eggs makes sense, but her knowing from egg on toast that it's a poached egg, that completely threw me.
Yeah,
I didn't know
okay.
that at all.
Well,
If someone said to you, if you said, "How do you want the egg cooked?" I don't know what shingle is, and they said, "Would you have bread, toast it, and you put the egg on it?" How would you get to poached egg from that?
because, and I agree with you, I've never heard of this thing, and I think it is baffling, and it demands a lot of prior knowledge from the audience. But her ex was an American GI, so presumably she made shit on a shingle for
Right.
him.
Right. So when he says on the toast, she's like, "Ah, shit on his shingle. He used to have that." Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. It just seemed like a weird way to explain a poached egg. You'd think the way you'd explain a poached egg to somebody would be about cracking an egg into boiling water, not about
But it is a
putting it on
conversation.
toast.
But it is kind of like a conversation that he's having with himself that nobody else would understand. I agree with that. Like, if there's a like if there's I can imagine a bunch of people taking their wives or girlfriends to see this film, and there being like a 50-50 split of ex-GIs who
They're
understand
like,
exactly
yeah,
what goes on.
shingle.
But but yeah, shit on a shingle. There we go.
Nice.
I'm gonna have to try that. Yeah. Well, we got to the bottom of that, Rob.
Well,
Uh,
thank you.
that's
It
all
wasn't
right.
it wasn't the shingle thing that was confusing me so much. It was how you explain it by saying an egg on toast. That was what
That's
was really
true.
confusing me.
But also, it
Um,
does seem like if that is an army dish, like poaching eggs is not. It's not an efficient way to serve a lot of people eggs.
that's true as well. Yeah,
You would scramble, wouldn't you? If you had to
you would
feed a lot of
scramble. You would
yeah
scramble.
yeah.
100%.
Okay, well,
So, have you got much more to say about
thus
this?
ends the culinary portion.
Like so basically from here on, so the job gets called off when the record player and all the people sort of run
Mm.
into their little cars and drive off, and Robert Ryan then hatches a plan. He blames the wrong guy, doesn't he? He goes and shoots one of his dudes while
Yeah,
he's in a little hot tub,
yes,
and
and
then
this no, well, this is. I mean, this is. It's kind of a callback to Robert Ford. I Shot Jesse James, because there's the scene in the hot tub where before he actually kills Jesse James, there's a scene in the hot tub where
Hmm,
um, he's contemplating, which in even back then, um, Sam Fuller was talking about the homoerotic undertones, and he's saying in this it's something that um, he wanted to kind of forefront here, and actually people noticed it and were kind of comment on it quite a bit. So there is a bit that I've picked out from his autobiography here. Um, um, it goes, the silliest damn thing was that even discussing the subject of homosexuality was frowned upon. Since the world began, it existed. Even when you can't, even when you do talk about it, you can't stereotype people or generalize their relationships, each one being special. Hell, I hate stereotypes and categories. Whether it's homosexuality, heterosexuality, race, nationality, what good do stereotypes do us except to turn us into simple minded bigots or fundamentalist zealots? So that was kind of his reaction to all of that, basically,
that's
which kind
pretty
of,
cool.
which, you know, he's, I don't know, you know, he's talking about this in 1954. Um, and it goes to the point of him having real characters. There are fewer um, uh, sort of Japanese characters, but he talks in this as well about him never even thinking about casting a Western actress in the lead for Mariko, that he always wanted a Japanese actress to play that. Although coincidentally, she happened to be married to an American man and lived in America, and that's
Mm.
part of how we knew her. But yeah, he didn't want to, um, he didn't want to
Yeah, put an extra
West
story.
Side
Yeah,
Story this, um, so
absolutely. I think that
so
is one of the best things about Sam Fuller, like the quote you read out and that thing, because I think it's easy to forget as well that for a lot of films they would have just done yellowface with an American actress for this role.
yeah.
So that's yeah,
And
that's laudable.
this is 1954. That this
Mm.
is a good sort of, and it's been going back a number of years, from a good 10 years before like the civil rights movement was in public consciousness.
Yeah.
Um, so he's doing that. I wanted to talk about the ending as well because you said you really enjoyed that, and I think the ending is spectacular on this. Like, there's a good story about it. Basically, that it's you referred to it as a fairground, but it was it was just it was thought of by the owner as a nursery. So like it was at the top of a department
Mm.
store, and there
Leave your
was
kids
this
there while you go round.
exactly, and it was genuine. It's not a set. It was all there and used and whatnot. And the owner of it was this wealthy businessman who had various interests, including owning a movie studio. So basically, initially, he said, "You can't use it. It's not a question of money. I'm not going to close it because this is open. This is who it's for. I'm not going to close it just so you can make your movie and kick the kids out." And Sam Fuller was like, "No, we want to use the kids as extras. We want to have it open and have it full of full of life being lived in." And he kind of warmed to the idea, and he looked at the script, and he kind of warmed to Sam Fuller and agreed as long as he could be an extra. But it was all really sort of genuine. The bit where they kind of chase him up to that rotating angled
Mm.
thing where they have the final shootout, and again, this looks great, like really well shot. Kind of reminded me a bit of North by Northwest or something like that, just in terms of the idea of this strange setting and
Mm.
and the sort of understanding the geography of it all, which doesn't get lost. You know where people are in relation to each other. It's a really I hadn't. It's not as it's rare that you watch a finale from a film this old and are impressed by it and kind of genuinely sort of enthralled by it. And I thought this was really good, really, really good. This ending. Um,
Yeah, going back before the kind of the department store fun fair thing, you also have the bit where they try to get the Japanese police to shoot the Eddie
yeah,
Spanier by having him kind of stood up in a room, knocked out, so they shoot his silhouette, and one of the henchmen gets killed because his silhouette gets seen instead, and all this. But that's a really cool scene as well, and using the silhouettes and all of that. So I do like this whole sequence. I think the actual ending of the ending sequence is a little bit anticlimactic because you get the kind of the hero, for want of a better word, sort of on his belly, sort of just almost out of shot and
mm.
quite far away, shoots Robert Ryan a couple of times, and then like it ends in the way
Well,
that old films
that
do, where they just go "Brr, brr,"
well,
and it's just like,
well, that's
yeah,
kind of very much a Fullerism as well, isn't it? He's like, story's done, I'm out, and like, he kind of there's a small little concession to he's got this shot of Eddie and Mariko kind of walking as the cherry blossom falls, and sort of they're going to live happily ever after. But that only lasts about 5 seconds. He's like, "No, we're out."
yeah,
Um, which is he does talk about that being shot in the middle of winter and it being absolutely freezing, and them having to put paper cherry blossom on the trees, and uh, Robert Stack getting incredibly pissed off by it all. I don't think Robert Stack particularly enjoyed working with him.
okay.
Oh, just noticed a name on the credits that I didn't know was on there. Oh yes, of course. Did you notice
Bones from Star
DeForest
Trek.
Kelly? Yeah,
Yeah. I knew about him being in it mainly not because I necessarily noticed him in the film, but because on Wikipedia it says that the film was always shown pan and scan on American TV, and DeForest Kelly is always off at the side, so audiences didn't know until they released the widescreen version again that he was even in the film because all of his bits were cut for the pan and scan.
Excellent. That's a lovely, lovely bit of trivia. I tell you what, the other thing, I couldn't find this out when I was looking up trivia about the film, but there were a couple of bits like where they're in a police station that looked a lot like the hospital corridors from some early Kurosawa films. And I wondered if that was
Right.
like a permanent set at one of the sound stages. And
I
the
think I
other
know the
thing,
bits you mean. Yeah, there are bits that look like they could be in Quiet Duel and things like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
and there was a bit, and the I doubt very much this is the case because I would imagine it was shot in America, but there was a bit when you first go into one of the police stations, and it looked a hell of a lot like uh, it looked a hell of a lot like the Raymond Burr additional scenes from Godzilla. Uh, um, the ones that were just sort of inserted in for an American audience.
Yeah.
But yeah, I doubt that's the case because I imagine they were shot in America, those scenes. But even so, it just tweaked a little bit in my head. I might do a side by side comparison with the Last Duel. Just I don't know what it is because I think there's that corridor. I just remember it popping up about 2 or 3 times, or something very similar
Hmm.
in the Kurosawa film. So I really do wonder if that's like a permanent set, or something like that. But anyway,
I think part of my problem with this film is that I wasn't necessarily watching it on its own terms in the sense of it became a different film than the one I hoped it would be when it started. And that's
hmm,
because it starts, or maybe it's partly the film's fault, because it does obviously start itself off a particular way. But with that narration as well, the narration talks about like this military convoy train is being guarded as a joint operation between the American army and the Japanese security forces and
yeah,
all that, which doesn't come into the film, irrelevant to the film.
yeah,
And the thing about that is what that set up for me was like, oh, this is interesting. Here we go. This is a film about post-war Japan and cooperation between the new kind of Japan and the American occupiers, and it's going to be something to do with that. And then when it was just like dudes in fedoras behind a pachinko parlor, I was like, oh.
yeah. I think you're right. I think without that narration, because it looks. I don't know if you've seen the Great Train Robbery, the version that was released not long after the actual robbery.
I
But
haven't, no.
in that and the actual robbery, they stopped the train on a bridge, did like a human chain of the stuff down. It looks so similar to what they actually did to the point where I wondered if Buster Edwards and the rest of them had actually seen this film. But if that was just that without all the military background, that could just be hoodlums doing a stick-up job, and then, but like you say, it kind of suggests, and I found this as well, it suggests it's going to be some sort of military police thing,
Hmm.
which technically it is,
Yeah,
um, but not for sort of
most of its duration.
military reasons. It's more
Yeah.
of a case that it seems to be more of a pretext as to why these Americans are still living in Japan, which I guess also at the time makes a lot of sense. Um, but what I did like about it as well is just 10 years after the end of the war, um, there is no um, there is no cultural tension between the two nations.
Hmm.
They are in complete cooperation. Um, there is mutual respect, and that maybe that's also a little bit kind of naive, or I can't think of the word. A little bit rose tinted, but I liked the idea that there was no animosity really. um, between the two nations at this point. That seemed very progressive in of itself as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I think I like it more now than I did. I think we've had this with a few of them where we talked about them where we've ended up sort of thinking either better or worse of them through the conversation. Yeah, I think I was probably slightly hard on this one. I do like it overall. I think just the film it's set up that it could have been is just leaves a shadow over it. But I think the location shooting and everything is amazing in it. And I think Fuller, this is his second Cinemascope film, isn't it? And both of his
Yeah.
films in Cinemascope look great and use it really well in a way that is not something I would have guessed. If you had said, like, what do you think Fuller's going to be like with Cinemascope at the beginning? I'd have been like, well, this guy's famous for making really low budget, slightly ropey looking movies. Like, I can't imagine he would particularly even care about using Cinemascope. So the fact that he's got two movies we've seen so far where they're actually reading around them a little bit, kind of heralded as great examples of using Cinemascope as well,
Mm.
like Hell and High Water being shown to people by Zanuck as, look, here's a drama you can make using it. Look at, you can even do it on a submarine as like an example. And then reading like just on the Wikipedia entry for this film, it talks about critics who think this is one of the finest examples of Cinemascope. So that's interesting to me because, like I say, it's not something that would have I would have guessed about Sam Fuller. Do
No,
you know
yeah,
if
absolutely.
do you know if when he returns to bigger budget stuff later with Big Red One, is that a widescreen film or is he?
Yeah, I believe
Yeah.
so. I've still yet to see Big Red One. Funnily enough, um, the cinema we both used to work at, um, it was playing there the week before I started, and I could have gone along and watched it, but I was thinking, if give it a week, and my tickets will be free. And it happened not to be showing after I started, so I sort of missed it.
Yeah.
And that was the reconstruction, that was the long cut as well. So yeah, I've not got round to the Big Red One yet because it was quite difficult to get hold of as well. There was a very limited DVD run at the time, and it was quite expensive for a long time afterwards. Yeah, and then by the time it was available, it was a few years later, and I'd stopped really thinking about Sam Fuller films. But anyway, but
Yeah.
no, I'm looking forward to that. Is one that I'm very much looking forward to, especially where it comes in the filmography towards the end.
Yeah. I'm excited to see it.
Yeah.
So what's
Um,
next?
we've got China Gate. So this is another CinemaScope war film. I'm just looking at this. I don't know much about this one. Set during the First Indochina War and depicts the relationship between the sergeant of the French Foreign Legion and the Eurasian wife, which he abandoned. So I think we got a little bit of melodrama coming on here. I know that just from I don't know a lot about it, like I say, but just from Wikipedia, it looks like it was banned in France for a while as well. Probably due to some sort of depiction of the Foreign Legion. So yeah,
It,
it's got some stars in it.
it does, yeah. I'm just seeing now. It's got Nat King Cole, Angie Dickinson, Lee Van Cleef. Interesting. It's interesting. We've talked on previous podcasts about how quick Fuller could be and how some of his early films were made in ridiculous, a week or whatever. And he released 3 films in 1957. So I'm guessing China Gate is one of these he's done relatively quick. If he's made
Yeah,
2 other films that year.
well, yeah, quite possibly. I mean, there is a 2-year gap, so maybe China Gate was had a little bit longer, or was shot towards the end of '56, as possible.
Yeah,
Um,
true.
but Run of the Arrow is certainly like a tight 120-minute shot, mainly outside, small cast. It's got a bit of a apocalypto kind of feel to it in parts as well. But that's a small one, and I think 40 Guns is the same as well. So yeah, that's where we are at.
Awesome. It looks to me like just looking at the casts, it looks to me like it's sort of the late 50s, early 60s when his films become a little bit sort of lower budget again and a little bit schlocky, because all of these late 50s ones, China Gate, we talked about the stars in that. Run of the Arrow's got Rod Steiger in it. 40 Guns has Barbara Stanwyck in it. They seem to be relatively sort of I don't know if high budget, but at least kind of mid-budget studio movies at this point, right? Or are these
Yeah,
independents now?
China Gate is 20th Century Fox. I don't think this is actually part of the deal, but I think original deal, but I think it spilt over a little bit. And then once we get through these, like you say, we go through another stage of slightly lower budget, kind of quick and dirty, kind of bombastic stuff, and it's got some of his best stuff in there, stuff like Verboten, Underworld
Shark.
USA.
They've all got cool like pulp. They've all got like pulpy names, though, haven't they? They've all got like sensational pulpy titles.
Yeah.
At that point,
Naked Kiss and Shock Corridor, particularly. Yeah, I think you'll like Shock Corridor. It was a big.
I've seen that one.
Oh,
Yeah,
you've seen that? That's the one
I've
that was a
seen
big
that one.
influence on Unsane.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, we're getting well ahead of ourselves.
We are indeed. So next time is China Gate, and
Yeah.
we'll look forward to talking about that one then. But in the meantime, we'll continue on our path to obtain a fuller understanding